a week or something ago, I did a video on sliding, and what I was saying in that video was to not look at your hand when you're sliding, but look at the target of where you're going to land, and I find that kind of ends up, for me, giving me a result of more accurate sliding. Anyway, that video didn't do very well, so I thought let's repeat that kind of thing, and I'll do another video which I think is hopefully sharing some wisdom that may help just one person. My job is to do the washing up. Okay, bear with me. What I've found fairly recently, given that I'm 32, you'd have thought I would have known this before, but scrubbing harder doesn't actually make any real difference. So if you've got like a piece of stuff which is stuck to a pan, and you put in loads of pressure, you'll find that basically the stain is removed just as quickly if you apply a lighter pressure and just do more strokes, or the same amount of strokes but lighter. A similar kind of principle applies with using sandpaper, and they tell you don't apply excess pressure, just let the sandpaper do the work. And so this kind of thing, I had a message on Patreon and someone was asking about playing with a vice grip. So you might have heard this sort of thought before, but people tend to play with quite a lot of pressure on the strings. And I said to that person, there's a video from Rick Graham about this which is really useful. Basically, in that video, he says fret a note with your normal amount of pressure and then try to sort of incrementally release pressure from the note until you get that sense of how much actual pressure is needed to fret a note. And generally I think you'll find that it's quite a bit less than you've been using. And that can give you an idea and help you to sort of get in your mind the idea that you don't necessarily have to play everything as hard as you have been. But still, for me, there's times when I would just dig in and play hard anyway, because whatever. But it's good, I think, to keep in mind that there's an amount of pressure that's actually needed to fret a note, and probably if you're like me or like many other people, you're probably using a bit too much pressure, or excess pressure, maybe not too much, depends on what you're going for or whether you like the sound of what you're playing. But there's a chance that there's pressure that is in excess of what would actually be needed to fret a note, and so that's worth bearing in mind. You can do the same with chords. Find that sweet spot of just enough pressure to fret the note. Experiment with that. That was something that really first came into my consciousness through Rick Graham, so check out that video if you can find it. In terms of technique, he's got a really solid technique and it's kind of beautiful to watch. That same kind of principle can apply, I think, to bending as well. For bending, in my mind, sort of I'm thinking of first of all fretting the note and then pushing up. So that feeling is sort of like you dig into the fretboard and then dig under the string. Another way to think about it, which I think yields potentially less pressure on the hand, and maybe it might just be a mental thing, but instead of thinking about digging into the fretboard and then up, just think about moving that string from A to B and visualize the actual mechanics of where the string is and where you want it to be, and instead of digging in and up, just think about moving that string up. So instead of a big kind of digging in pressure, I'm trying to imagine that I'm just pulling that string to where it needs to be in order to get the bend to sound. Incidentally, a way to practice bends, if you've not seen this, there's a Guthrie Gowan video where he talks about you play the target and bend up to it. Also useful, I think. So this is something I've noticed when I've tried learning new chords and when I've been trying to teach other people new chords. When you learn a new chord and you try and apply it, there tends to be this kind of big reset, and you have to think sort of one string at a time and one note at a time. And so if you were to go and put it into a progression, what you might end up doing is something like that. Obviously it wouldn't be as pronounced as that, but you see people do like a complete lift off and then apply one finger at a time. So one of the things that I suggest practicing for this is to actually just visualize the path of each finger individually and sort of practice it slowly. So in this case, for whatever reason, we're going from G to B, dominant 7. So I would first visualize from each string down where the fingers are going to move to. So my middle finger, its path will go something like that, and then its pointer finger, its path will go something like that. So then I might visualize those two together, so that's what the top part of my hand will be doing. Okay, and then my ring finger will be going to here, and then my pinky will just be moving down one fret. So visualizing all of those pathways together, I would practice individually, and then instead of viewing it as this big jump where your fingers do all sorts of things before eventually settling where they need to be, try and visualize the most efficient path and have your fingers moving only in the right direction, and as slow as that needs to be for you to achieve that. And hopefully that might translate to a smoother chord change rather than you know, the sort of thing that you might have seen yourself doing or whatever when you've got a new chord shape. Oh, that was one final thing I wanted to talk about. Just quickly recap. So play with a light touch. You'll probably find that you're using a lot of excess energy to fret notes in general. So try kind of applying pressure and gradually taking off the pressure until you find that spot where you can fret a note with minimal energy and just get a feel for how that feels with each finger, and get a sense for that, and then keep that in mind when you're playing guitar. Notice how much pressure you're fretting with. The other thing is to think of a bend instead of like a digging in and up. Just think of it as a moving a string to that place that it needs to be in tune, and moving it upwards rather than into the fretboard and upwards. Then the other thing was, when you're playing new chords, visualize the path for each of your fingers to move to their intended place without wasted movements. Then the very last thing I wanted to talk about was potentially dynamics. So dynamics means essentially the difference between the softest parts of a song and the loudest parts. That's what we're talking about. It's that range of volume. You could think about accents as sort of a function of dynamics as well as rhythm. What I would think about is that you've got a headroom naturally. So if you start your first note, whether you're playing a solo or a riff or whatever, you've got really nowhere to go with it. So picking in general with a lighter touch not only has some kind of tonal benefits, but it means that you've got room to accent certain things. But if you start with a really hard stroke, you've really got nowhere to go with your dynamics. So that's one thing I kind of learned from piano lessons and stuff, that if you start playing a piece of music kind of too loud already, when it comes to the part of the tune that you wanted to be louder and you wanted to accent and you wanted to bring the dynamics forward, you're going to find it difficult because there's a lack of headroom, because you kind of already started too loud, if that makes sense. Hopefully some of that's vaguely interesting and might be useful in some way to maybe one person or two, but I thought it was maybe something worth talking about. If that is the kind of video you like to see, let me know in the comments, and maybe like and subscribe if you wanted to. This preset I'm using is ODS Reverb, which I created yesterday. So, just to recap very quickly, you might be playing with a heavier touch than you need to, so experiment with that. When you're thinking of bending, just think about moving the string upwards rather than inwards and upwards. When you're moving to new chord shapes, visualize the path of each individual finger and practice that slowly. And then when it comes to dynamics, think about playing everything a little bit quieter so that you've got more headroom to play your louder notes loud. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you for another video soon. Cheers.